I didn't mean to fall in love with him. It just happened. Between shared grocery bags and quiet bus rides. Between late-night instant noodles and the soft sound of him clearing his throat whenever our fingers brushed. Miho wasn't the kind of alpha people noticed. He wasn't loud. He didn't flirt. He didn't smirk like he owned the world. He kept his head down. And blushed. A lot. We became roommates by accident. The university housing office messed up our applications, and somehow an Omega who loved warm lights and loud music, ended up sharing a tiny off-campus apartment with the shyest alpha I had ever met. The first time I saw him, he bowed. Actually bowed. I'll stay out of your way, he said softly. Eyes fixed somewhere near my shoulder instead of my face. Out of my way. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment the size of a shoebox. But Miho kept his promise. He cooked quietly, cleaned quietly, studied quietly. He even walked quietly. Sometimes I would look up from the couch and realize he had been standing there for who knows how long, holding a cup of tea like he was waiting for permission to exist. You can just talk to me, I told him once. His ears turned red instantly. I am talking, he replied. And for some reason, that was the moment my heart did something strange. It fluttered. Just a little. The accident happened on a rainy Thursday. I had forgotten my umbrella, and by the time I reached the apartment building, I was soaked. My sweater clung to my skin, and the cold made my scent spike faintly in the air. The hallway light flickered as I fumbled with my keys. Before I could unlock the door, it swung open. Miho stood there. He must have heard my footsteps. His eyes widened when he saw me. You're wet, he said, panicked. I blinked. It's raining. He looked even more flustered, as if the rain had personally offended him. Without another word, he disappeared into the apartment and came back with a towel. He hesitated just for a second, before gently placing it over my head. Not rubbing, not touching too much, just carefully drying my hair like I was something fragile. His hands were warm, so warm. You'll get sick, he murmured. His scent, soft cedar and something sweet, wrapped around me, steady and calming. Not overwhelming like most alphas, just safe. I looked up. He was so close. Close enough that I could see the tiny scar near his eyebrow. Close enough to notice how his lashes trembled when our eyes accidentally met. And then, he stepped back like he'd been burned. Sorry, he stammered. For what? For caring? For being gentle? For making my heart feel like it was melting into something dangerous? That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My hair still smelled faintly like his fabric softener. And for the first time, I realized something terrifying. I liked the quiet. I liked the shy glances. I liked the way he waited outside my lecture hall every Tuesday, pretending it was coincidence. I liked the way he always cooked extra, just in case. I liked him, and I didn't know when it started. All I knew was this, somewhere between, I'll stay out of your way, and you'll get sick. I had accidentally fallen in love with my shy alpha, and I was almost certain he had absolutely no idea. The next morning, the apartment felt different. The air was thick, not with tension, but with something heavy and sweet. I found him in the kitchen. Miho didn't hear me come in. He was focused on a stack of pancakes, his large alpha hands moving with surprising grace as he drizzled honey over them. He was wearing a thin gray t-shirt, and for the first time I noticed how broad his shoulders actually were. He looked like a warrior trying to blend into a domestic life. When he finally turned and saw me, he jumped. The plate nearly slipped. He stared at his feet, his ears turning that familiar shade of pink. For you, to warm up. From yesterday. He didn't hand me the plate. He placed it on the table and stepped back, giving me a wide berth like he was afraid his own presence might be too much for me. Thank you, Miho, I said, my voice softer than usual. We sat across from each other. The only sound was the scrape of forks and the distant hum of the refrigerator. I watched him out of the corner of my eye. He ate like he was trying to be invisible, small bites, quiet chews. Then I reached for the syrup at the same time he did. Our fingers didn't just brush. They collided. Miho didn't flinch this time. Instead, his hand stayed there, covering mine. His skin was burning hot, alpha heat. I looked up, and for the first time, he didn't look away. His pupils were slightly blown, and his scent, that cedar and spice, suddenly sharpened, filling my lungs until my head felt light. "Your scent?" he whispered, his voice deeper, losing its stutter for a split second. "It's changing." My heart stopped. In the Omegaverse, a scent change meant only one thing: my body was reacting to him. I was starting to smell like his Omega. Realizing what he'd said, Miho practically bolted upright, his chair screeching against the floor. I have to go. Library. Studying." He grabbed his bag and rushed toward the door. But as he passed me, he did something that made my breath hitch. He didn't touch me, but he paused just behind my shoulder. I felt the heat radiating off him. He took a deep, shaky breath, inhaling me, before practically stumbling out the door. I sat there, frozen. I looked down at the table. He had left his hoodie draped over the back of his chair. Without thinking, I reached out and pulled it into my lap. It was heavy, warm, and smelled so strongly of alpha that it made my toes curl. He was shy, yes. He was awkward, definitely. But as I buried my face in his hoodie, I realized Miho wasn't just staying out of my way. He was fighting himself. He was trying to be a gentleman when every alpha instinct he had was telling him to claim the kitchen, the apartment, and me. The accident wasn't just falling in love. The accident was realizing that behind that shy smile, there was a lion trying very hard not to roar. Miho didn't come home until late. I knew he was avoiding me. He was probably at the library, staring at the same page of a textbook for 5 hours. His face still red from the scent comment in the kitchen. I should have gone to bed. But instead, I was on the couch, wrapped in his hoodie. I told myself I was just cold. But the way my inner Omega purred every time I moved and caught a whiff of cedar told a different story. When the front door finally clicked open at 11 p.m., I froze. Miho stepped in, looking exhausted. His hair was messy from the wind, and his glasses were fogged up. He stopped dead when he saw me, and then his eyes dropped to the hoodie I was wearing. His hoodie. The air in the room shifted instantly. His scent flared, darker, woodier, like a forest after a fire. I thought you were asleep," he stammered, his hand gripping the strap of his bag so hard his knuckles turned white. "I couldn't sleep," I said, my voice sounding a little breathy even to my own ears. "I got cold." He looked like he wanted to run away again, but his alpha legs wouldn't move. He was staring at the way the oversized sleeves covered my hands. It looks good on you." He said it so quietly I almost missed it. It wasn't a stutter. It was a compliment, raw and honest. "Miho?" "Yes. Come here." He hesitated, then took 3 slow, heavy steps toward the couch. He sat down at the very edge, leaving a clear foot of space between us, but I could feel the heat radiating off him. He was vibrating with suppressed energy. "You're doing it again," I murmured, leaning slightly toward him. "Doing what?" "Trying to disappear. Why are you so afraid of being near me?" Miho looked down at his hands. "I'm an alpha, Haru. I know I don't act like the ones in the movies, but I'm still one. And when I'm near you, especially when you're wearing my clothes, it's hard to stay quiet. I don't want to scare you." My heart did a somersault. He wasn't shy because he was weak. He was shy because he was protecting me from his own intensity. "You don't scare me," I said. To prove it, I reached out and grabbed the hem of his shirt, tugging him closer. He gasped, a low sound that vibrated in his chest. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were dark with a hunger he had been trying so hard to hide. "I'm not fragile, Miho. You don't have to bow. You don't have to stay out of my way." The silence that followed was heavy. I could hear his heartbeat, fast, erratic, matching mine. Slowly, as if he were approaching a stray kitten, Miho reached out. His large hand hovered near my face before his thumb finally grazed my cheek. His touch was electric. "I've wanted to do that since the day we moved in," he whispered. But just as he started to lean in, just as the scent of cedar and omega sweetness began to swirl into something dangerous, his phone buzzed loudly on the coffee table. The spell broke. Miho jumped back, his face turning a shade of red I didn't think was humanly possible. I have a text. From my mom. I have to go. Good night." He practically sprinted to his room, the door clicking shut behind him. I sank back into the cushions, clutching the hoodie to my chest. My heart was thudding against my ribs like a trapped bird. He had almost kissed me. The shy alpha had almost claimed me. And as I looked at his closed bedroom door, I realized I didn't just want the hoodie anymore. I wanted the owner. The next morning was awkward. Miho wouldn't even look at the toaster while I was in the kitchen. He was back to being a ghost, but the air between us felt like a live wire. Every time I moved, I could feel his eyes tracking me, even if he looked away the second I turned around. I decided I needed some fresh air, so I headed to the campus cafe to work on a project with a classmate, a loud and boisterous alpha named Jax. Jax was the opposite of Miho. He smelled like heavy cologne and leather, and he talked enough for 3 people. "You're distracted today," Jax laughed, leaning in close to look at my laptop screen. He put a heavy arm across the back of my chair, his scent clashing unpleasantly with the cedar I still had tucked in my memory. "Is it that roommate of yours? I heard he's a bit unusual for an alpha. He's just quiet," I snapped, feeling a sudden, sharp need to defend Miho. "Whatever you say," Jax grinned, leaning even closer until his shoulder was pressed against mine. "But you're an Omega. You need someone who can actually take charge, don't you think?" I was about to tell him to back off when I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. The bell above the cafe door had chimed, but the room had gone silent. A scent, cold, sharp, and absolutely overwhelming, swept through the cafe. It was Miho, but it wasn't the sweet cedar Miho. It was the forest before a storm. I looked up and saw him standing by the entrance. He wasn't bowing. He wasn't looking at the floor. His eyes were fixed directly on Jax's arm, which was still draped behind my chair. Miho walked over. He didn't run. He didn't stumble. Each step was heavy and deliberate. "We're leaving," Miho said. His voice wasn't a whisper. It was a low, vibrating growl that seemed to rumble in the very floorboards. Jax blinked, looking surprised. "Whoa, hey man, we're just studying." Miho didn't even look at Jax. He looked at me. His pupils were so blown they were almost entirely black, a sign of an alpha's protective instinct taking over. He reached out, his large hand wrapping firmly around my wrist. He didn't hurt me, but his grip was possessive, unyielding. "I said," Miho repeated, his gaze flickering to Jax with a coldness that made the louder alpha actually flinch. "We are leaving. Now." I didn't argue. My inner Omega was practically preening at the display of dominance. Miho led me out of the cafe, his hand never leaving my wrist. He walked fast, pulling me along until we reached the quiet alleyway behind the building. He stopped suddenly and spun around, pinning me gently but firmly against the brick wall. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. The shyness was gone, replaced by a raw, territorial heat. "He was touching you," Miho rasped, his face inches from mine. "His scent was all over you. I could smell it from the door." "Miho," I whispered, my heart hammering. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling sharply. He didn't bite, but he nuzzled the sensitive skin there, his stubble grazing me. It was a claim, a silent, desperate marking. "Don't," he groaned against my skin. "Don't let them near you." I try to be good. I try to stay back. But when I see them touch you, I want to tear the world apart. He pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. The blush was starting to creep back into his cheeks, the shy Miho fighting to return. But the alpha in him wasn't done yet. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice trembling. I shouldn't have." He started to pull his hand away, but this time I didn't let him. I grabbed his shirt and pulled him back. "Don't apologize," I said, my voice firm. "For once, Miho, don't be sorry." The walk back to the apartment was the quietest one yet. But it wasn't the comfortable quiet from before. It was charged. Every time Miho's arm brushed mine, I felt a spark of heat. He was back to looking at the sidewalk, his shoulders hunched as if he could hide his large frame. But his scent was still heavy, dark cedar and burnt honey. The moment we stepped inside and the door clicked shut, Miho collapsed against it. He covered his face with his hands, his ears glowing a deep, vibrant red. "I'm a monster," he muffled into his palms. I touched you like that," I growled. "I'm so sorry. I'll pack my bags, Miho, stop." I stepped into his space, forcing him to look at me. You're not a monster. You were protecting me. I was being possessive, he whispered, finally dropping his hands. His eyes were watery, filled with that heartbreaking shyness again. I've spent my whole life trying to be the nice alpha, the one who doesn't take up space, the one who doesn't claim things. But today, seeing that guy's hand on you, I felt like I was losing my mind. I reached up, tentatively placing my hands on his chest. I could feel his heart thudding like a drum. I liked it, I confessed. Miho froze. What? I liked that you chose me. I liked that you didn't let him talk down to us. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper. And I especially liked the way you smelled in that alleyway. Miho's breath hitched. He looked down at my neck, where he had nuzzled me just minutes ago. Even though he hadn't bitten me, my skin was flushed, marked by his heat. You smell like me, he breathed, his voice turning low and gravelly again. My scent is all over your collar. Everyone on the street knows you belong to a cedar-scented alpha now. He sounded half terrified and half proud. I took a brave step closer, my chest pressing against his. Then finish it. Miho's eyes widened. Finish? What? The marking. Not a bite, not yet. But scent me properly, so I don't have to smell that other alpha on my skin anymore. For a long moment, the shy Miho fought with the instinctual Miho. Then, with a shaky sigh, he surrendered. He wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me flush against him. He was so much bigger than me, so much warmer. He buried his face in my hair, rubbing his cheek against mine, his scent glands working to coat me in his essence. It was an intimate, slow dance. He moved to my neck, trailing his nose along the sensitive line of my pulse point. You're mine, he murmured, the words vibrating against my skin. Mine. He wasn't stuttering anymore. I melted into him, my hands tangling in his soft hair. We stayed like that for a long time, just breathing each other in, turning our tiny shoebox apartment into a sanctuary. But just as I thought he might finally take the lead, Miho pulled back, his eyes wide and panicked as he realized he was still holding me. I should go make dinner, he squeaked, the shy alpha returning in full force. I bought broccoli. It's good for health. He scrambled into the kitchen, nearly tripping over his own feet. I stood in the hallway, dazed, smelling like a forest after a rainstorm and smiling like an idiot. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen, expecting to see him in his usual oversized hoodie, nursing a cup of tea. Instead, I found him wearing a leather jacket. He was standing by the counter, gripping a mug of black coffee like his life depended on it. He was trying to lean back casually, but his posture was so stiff he looked like a statue. Miho, I asked, stopping in the doorway. Why are you wearing a jacket? It's not even cold in here. He jumped, nearly splashing coffee onto his pajamas, which were still visible underneath the leather. He scrambled to find his balance, his face instantly turning a shade of red that rivaled a sunset. I was just being assertive, he mumbled, looking everywhere but at me. Assertive. I suppressed a smile, stepping closer. He sighed, his shoulders dropping as the cool facade crumbled. I looked it up last night. How to be the alpha your omega deserves. The top article said I needed to project more presence. It suggested leather and black coffee. Couldn't help it. A giggle escaped me. I walked right into his space, reaching out to touch the stiff, cold material of the sleeve. Miho, you're drinking black coffee? You hate bitter things. You put 3 spoons of sugar in your tea. He looked down at his mug with a grimace. It's terrible, actually. I took the mug from his hand and set it on the counter, then looked up at him. You don't need a jacket or a personality change. I didn't fall for a cool alpha. I fell for the one who dries my hair when it rains and makes me pancakes so I don't get sick. His eyes softened, that raw, shy devotion swirling in them again. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face before he gathered the courage to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was warm, so much warmer than the leather. I want to do it right, he whispered. A real date, no distractions, no hiding, just us. I'd like that, I said, my heart thumping against my ribs. Good. He nodded, then looked down at himself, looking flustered. Can I take this off now? It's really itchy and I think I'm starting to sweat. I laughed, pulling him into a hug, burying my face in his chest. Yes, please. Give me my soft alpha back. But as he started to pull the jacket off, a loud, sharp knock echoed through the door. It wasn't the friendly tap of a neighbor. It was a command. Miho went rigid in my arms. His scent sharpened, turning from warm cedar to something cold and defensive. I opened the door, and my breath caught. A woman stood there, looking like a high-fashion version of Miho, but with eyes like shards of glass. She swept her gaze over me, then over the apartment, her nose wrinkling in immediate distaste. Miho, she said, her voice like a whip. Why does this place smell like an unbonded Omega? And why are you standing there in your sleepwear at this hour? Miho went pale, his voice barely a breath. Mother! Miho didn't move. He stood beside me, a silent, vibrating weight. I could feel the heat radiating off him, but it wasn't the comforting warmth from earlier. It was the heat of a cornered animal. I asked you a question, Miho, she said, stepping into the room without waiting. She didn't look at the furniture. She looked at the space between us. The air in here is thick enough to choke a person. Have you completely forgotten your sense suppressants? Or have you just lost all sense of propriety? I forgot, Miho whispered. I hated how small his voice sounded. It made my chest ache. This was the man who had stood up to Jax in the cafe. Yet under her gaze, he looked like he was trying to disappear into his own skin. She finally turned her eyes on me. They were the same shape as Miho's, but there was no kindness in them. And you must be the reason for this lapse in judgment, she said. She didn't use my name. To her, I was just a reason. An Omega roommate. I thought the university had reached a level of professional standards, but clearly, I was mistaken. It's not his fault, I said, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. I stepped forward, trying to shield Miho, even though he was twice my size. The housing office made a mistake. We made it work. Made it work. She let out a sharp, mocking hum. She walked over to the kitchen counter, her gloved finger trailing over the plate of leftover pancakes. By nesting together? By letting him claim you with his scent before a single contract has been signed or a family meeting held. She turned back to Miho, her expression hardening. You are the heir to a lineage that prides itself on discipline. Your father is waiting for you to return and take your place in the firm. And instead, I find you playing house in a shoebox with someone who clearly doesn't understand the weight of your name. He understands me, Miho shouted. The sound was so sudden it made me jump. Miho had stepped forward. His fists were clenched at his sides, and his eyes, usually so soft and apologetic, were flashing. He understands me better than you ever did, he said, his voice trembling with a mix of fury and fear. And I'm not playing house. I'm living. For the first time, I'm actually living. His mother didn't flinch. She just looked at him with a pity that felt worse than a slap. Passion is a fleeting scent, Miho. It fades. What remains is duty. I'll be at the Grand Hotel. You will join me for dinner at 8. Alone. She looked at me one last time. A look that dismissed my entire existence, before turning on her heel and walking out. The door clicked shut, and the silence that rushed back in was deafening. Miho's strength seemed to evaporate the moment she was gone. He slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. His scent was chaotic now, sharp, bitter, and distressed. I sat down beside him, not saying a word, and just leaned my head against his shoulder. I wanted to tell him it would be okay, but I could still feel the chill she had left behind. She's going to try to make me leave, he muffled into his palms. She's going to tell me I'm failing my family, that I'm too weak to be an alpha if I stay here with you. I reached over, taking one of his hands and pulling it away from his face. Are you? I asked softly. Are you going to leave? He looked at me then, his eyes red-rimmed and raw. He reached out, his thumb brushing against my neck, right over the spot he had scented yesterday. I'd rather lose my name than lose this, he whispered. But as he said it, I saw the fear in his eyes. The apartment felt freezing the moment Miho walked out the door for dinner. He had traded his itchy leather jacket for a crisp, charcoal suit that made him look older, and much further away from me. He had paused at the door, his hand lingering on the frame. "I'll be back," he had promised, his scent flickering with a desperate need for me to believe him. "I'll be back, and I'll still be yours." 3 hours later, I was pacing the floor of our tiny kitchen. Every shadow looked like his mother's cold eyes. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like the ending of us. I looked at the stack of books on the coffee table, his biology texts resting against my art pads. We were a mess of accidents that had somehow become a home. The thought of her pulling him away, back to a world of firms and discipline and alphas who didn't bow, made my stomach twist. I couldn't just sit here. I went to his room, a place I rarely entered, and sat on the edge of his bed. The scent of cedar was strongest here. It wrapped around me, a silent comfort that told me he was still here, even if he wasn't. I found myself gathering his pillows, stacking them around me on the floor. My inner Omega was taking over, driven by the stress of his absence. I was nesting. I didn't care if it was improper. I needed to feel him. I was curled up in a circle of his hoodies and blankets when I heard the fumbled click of the front door. I scrambled to my feet, my heart hammering against my ribs. Miho stumbled in. His tie was loosened, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were blown wide. He didn't look like a distracted alpha. He looked like a man who had just finished a war. He didn't say anything. He just saw me standing there, surrounded by his clothes, and made a sound low in his throat. A pained, needy whine. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled me into him so hard the air left my lungs. "She chose my brother instead," he rasped, his face buried in my neck. "She said I'm too weak to take over the family business. She said I was wasting my potential on a mistake." I gripped the back of his suit jacket, terrified to let go. "And," he pulled back, his hands cupping my face. His thumbs traced my cheekbones with a ferocity I'd never seen before. "I told her I already have my everything," he whispered. "I told her that if being an alpha means being like her, then I'd rather be nothing at all. As long as I'm with you." The relief that swept through me was so violent I almost fell. He had chosen me. The shyest alpha in the world had stood his ground against the one person he feared most. "She disowned you, didn't she?" I realized, looking at his trembling hands. "She tried to," he said, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "But my father didn't allow it." He looked down at the pile of clothes on the floor, my messy, desperate nest. His pupils dilated, his scent exploding into a rich, heavy sweetness that made my knees weak. "You nested," he breathed, his voice dropping into that deep, alpha register. "For me." I nodded, my face heating up. "I thought I was losing you." "Never," he promised, his forehead dropping against mine. "You're never losing me." The aftermath was a blur. Miho worked more hours at the campus library, and I took on extra shifts at the cafe. The apartment finally felt like it belonged to us. The accident was over. This was a choice now. One rainy Tuesday, exactly